Good morning, Digit fam. Adam Dowd here, ready to start another week of tech awesomeness, and this is going to be an interesting week. For one thing, we're going to have some friends stop by to say hi, so that'll be fun. Sam's going to check in with a Proof of Life podcast. It has been a while, sorry about that. But mostly, we're going to have some great tech and some great fun, but for now, it is August 19th, 2019, and this is your Digit Daily. AirDrop is one of those things that I really don't think about all that much. I have a Mac and an iPad at home, but I don't need to transfer files between them very often. But when I visited CES last January, holy lord, there was some airdropping going on. Airdropping video files, airdropping photos, airdropping documents. It was crazy. And it was incredibly useful, especially since our hotel Wi-Fi was so bad, I had to walk half a mile to the Starbucks next door to publish the Digit Daily. And yes, you heard that right, a half mile to the Starbucks next door. And this is why I don't like Vegas. Anyway, Android hasn't really been able to copy that, or at least not with the same amount of ubiquity as Apple. Anyone with an Apple device can AirDrop. It doesn't matter if it's a phone, tablet, laptop, whatever. Android Beam is the closest we got in Android, and it was never really all that good. Google looks to be rebranding that service Fast Share in Android Q, but all that means is that it'll have a different name that no one will ever see. Meanwhile, in China, Oppo, Xiaomi, and Vivo are creating their own alliance to support peer-to-peer file sharing outside of Android. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense until you hear this next part. Part of that rebranding of Fast Share that we talked about includes a requirement that you use Google Play services for Fast Share to work. Oh, okay. Google Play Services es no bueno in China, so that feature which nobody uses is gonna be broken. So the three amigos are looking to unbreak it with their own version, which presumably no one will still use. Now, those three make up about 49% of the Chinese market, which is pretty substantial. But one notable missing name is Huawei. But we're not even sure Huawei's going to be using Android much longer, so they might have bigger fish to fry at the moment. It's like trying to sell a new garage door to a dude whose house is literally down the block from a forest fire. Maybe come back in a few days, know your audience. But the door is open. The alliance is open to new members, which I'm sure is a massive load off of Huawei's shoulders. The new protocol will use a combination of Bluetooth and Wi-Fi to transfer files, but there will be no third-party app. Perhaps an OS upgrade will be necessary or something like that. It's too soon to tell. And speaking of too soon to tell, will this exist outside of China? What devices will support it? Will it be backwards compatible? Is this another play trying to make Android obsolete in China? That last question is the big one. And while we contemplate that, let's head into the roundup! Speaking of Huawei, remember that 90-day reprieve it got from President Trump? It expires today, or at least it would have if the US hadn't granted another 90-day extension. And I'm trying to decide if this is like a parent grounding their kid but then giving them the Nintendo Switch anyway, or if this is more like you trying to get into the car while your a-hole friends keep pulling the car up every time you reach for the handle. And speaking of trade wars, Tim Cook had a sit-down with President Trump where he complained about how these tariffs were making it hard to compete against Samsung, its biggest competitor, because Samsung does most of its manufacturing in Korea, not China, so it doesn't have to deal with tariffs. By the way, those tariffs, which were supposed to go into effect on September 1st, got pushed back to December 15th so as not to affect the holiday shopping season. And here, Billy, since you cried, you can play with your Switch. I guess I made that decision after all. Loop Ventures ran its annual Alexa versus Google versus Siri test, and Google still came out on top, understanding 100% of questions asked and answering 92% of them correctly. Unsurprisingly, Alexa and Siri followed in that order, answering 83% and 80% of questions correctly, respectively. I think what bugs me most about this is that Siri's been around the longest and should be doing better, but it's just not. And I'm frankly dubious about that 83% thing for Alexa, considering most questions I ask that aren't math or buying something result in, "Sorry, I don't understand." I guess I'm just Team Google. Over the weekend, Joe Hindi, my podcast partner on the Android Authority podcast, link in the show notes, published his Android Apps Weekly as per usual. But was not usual was a new game he wrote about called Type 2 FPS TD, which combines my two favorite types of games, tower defense and first-person shooters. How that actually works is actually kind of a mystery to me. There's an associated video of gameplay, but the mechanics are a little fuzzy there. I'll probably pick it up and give it a try after this podcast publishes, and there goes my productivity for the rest of the day. Ikea has decided to go all in on smart home technology, creating a whole new business unit for the project. Ikea already has a line of products out there, including Qi charging lamps, some Sonos smart speakers, and some smart lighting options. So far, Ikea has remained platform agnostic, working on Siri, Google, and Amazon devices, and in a press release, Ikea said, quote, "We're just getting started. All I want to know is how terrible those directions are going to be for setting up smart home devices. I mean, how do you draw pairing your smartphone to a light bulb in a vague way that makes you want to cry? It'll be challenging for the artists, to be sure." This is a technology podcast, and as such, we often report on the bleeding edge of technology and communications. But now we're going the other way with that, much like the US Navy is doing, because the Navy is running tests of a communication method originally deployed during World War II, dropping beanbags onto ships with messages in them. The continuing threat of Russian and Chinese cyber attacks crippling advanced communications necessitates these drills. This is the military equivalent of teaching teenagers how to give change when the register goes down, because it will, and they will freak out, and you will stand there and try to resist the urge to choke a Segway Ninebot Group, a Chinese scooter manufacturer, unveiled a semi-autonomous scooter that can drive itself to charging stations. As people start to focus more and more on micro-mobility, scooters seem to be emerging as the leaders, but maintaining them is a major pain. Plus, as we discussed a few weeks ago, some folks are complaining about scooters being left all over the place, and they're getting impounded, only mostly legally. So a scooter that can drive itself back to a charging stand seems like a good idea, until you wonder, is it better to trip over a scooter when you're walking out of a store, or to have a scooter run into you by itself when it's on its way home? I'm not sure we as a society are prepared to answer that question. And finally, just over 550 days ago, Elon Musk sent his Tesla Roadster along with something in a spacesuit for a trip around the sun, and today, that Roadster has finished its first trip around the sun. It's not close to Earth or anything, it's just in the same region of space that the Earth was inhabiting when it first launched. The closest Starman will come to Earth in the near future is on November 5th, 2020, and it'll be about 32.2 million miles away. I'm not sure why any of this is interesting, except just what is in that spacesuit? Doesn't that just seem weird? I mean, I'm trying not to imagine what's in that spacesuit, but you kind of have to wonder what's in that spacesuit, don't you? Has anyone seen Elon Musk's gardener with the sticky fingers in the past 500 days or so? Just wondering. So that's going to do it for today's Digit Daily. If you'd like to learn more about any of these stories, check out the links in the show notes and subscribe to our daily newsletter on Digit.com. And if you like what you heard, subscribe, leave a review, and don't forget to tell your friends about DigitDailyPod.com. Once again, I'm Adam Dowd, Dead Technology on Twitter, and we'll talk again tomorrow.